Okay, hello everyone, welcome. We're excited to share our topic today. Can you all see my screen? Can you see the screen, Jill? Okay, great. Let's go ahead and get started. So our topic today, we're going to be discussing fueling AI with member data, the secret to smarter credit union engagement. And I'm really excited to introduce you to our hosts. Our hosts are Gordon Flammer. He's the CEO of Datava. He's got over 20 years of experience in the credit union industry, and he's worked with over 100 financial institutions with assets up to $795 billion implementing software. And he's also helped FIs grow revenues by up to 300%. We also have David Deckelman with us today. He's the SVP of MSA, and he's the CEO of CU Wireless LiveSurvey. So he's been a leader in the credit union industry and worked for MapCU for over 27 years. He's developed and scaled multiple successful CUSOs, and he currently manages the MapCU CUSO. And he became the CEO of LiveSurvey in 2018. And lastly, we've got Sarup with us. Sarup is the Senso co-founder. He's also spearheads First Principles AI, and he actively participates in mentorship programs at global accelerators like Techstars and Founders Institute. And he's a guest lecturer at institutions such as the University of Toronto, Harvard, and Queen's University. So I'm just really excited to introduce you to these three, and we'll go ahead and kick it off.
Yeah, so welcome everybody. Really excited to talk about this topic, and really I think it's just some very unique ways that financial institutions are going to be able to leverage AI to best serve their members using the combination of what each one of our companies are doing, and hopefully we can give you some really good insight into that across everything. So, one of the biggest things is everyone's talking about AI right now. And the big question is what do you do with it? How do you actually make it effective? Effectively, 3/4 of financial institutions know that this is something that their members are needing, but there's a huge gap between knowing that someone needs something and knowing the correct and effective way to be able to deploy that. The three kind of like pillars, I would say, that you really need to have effective, successful AI is first is you need high quality data. The second is you need a reliable model. And then the third is that you need an effective delivery mechanism. So Sarup, to kind of throw it to him, he's really been on, I would say, like the cutting edge, and he's in Silicon Valley. You're part of meetings and a lot of the different conversations that have been happening around AI, especially over the last couple of years. So, Sarup, anything that you wanted to add on color, specifically around what makes successful versus not successful AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Gordon. And just taking a step back, I think that there's been a lot of hype since the launch of ChatGPT in late 2022. Everybody's trying to get on the bandwagon, but this whole artificial intelligence revolution has actually been 8 decades in the making. I know many credit unions have adopted AI prior to 2022 with more classical AI, with predicting loan outcomes, fraud, etc. But this new wave of AI is completely different, and it's built on a lot of the foundation of the previous models that have been built. We finally are in an era where you can generate pretty much anything using these models, right? And it really is unstructured data that is the data. Typically, with classical AI models, it was a structured data that you would embed into these models, and you'd be able to improve. It was very, very expensive. And I think one thing that's occurred in the last, I'd say 5 years, 2017, Google released a paper called "Attention is All You Need," and that really kind of sparked this whole evolution of language models. And language as an unstructured data set is very predictive, because we've been contributing to this data set across the public internet for about 4 years, right? And so really training these models using that data has really kind of sparked this revolution. And it really comes down to high quality data. As I said, most of these models are trained on the public internet. But the real question is, how do you leverage unstructured data within your organizations, like your policies, procedures, guides, your call transcripts, in a way that you can get a lot of use out of it and benefit your members? So really kind of like the first pillar is, how do you turn your messy data into high quality data that's going to be effective, right? And ingest it into a model that is already pre-trained. So the benefit of these models right now is it's really cheap to get outcomes out of, but again, garbage in, garbage out. Your data is only as good as the data that goes in. I'm sure you guys have heard that term. So there's a lot of nurturing that goes into creating a reliable model. It's not only just, taking an OpenAI API key and plugging it in, right? You got to get a tight feedback loop going and constantly leverage the results and the outcomes to ultimately retrain these models, fine tune these models for better predictive outcomes. And that's just a cycle of improvement that is ongoing until you measure exceptional results. And then usually evaluation metrics are used to do that. And I'm going to talk about that in a future slide. You cannot get a tight feedback loop without an effective delivery mechanism like Datava has. And so having that tight feedback loop requires you to collect data based on user interactions and other data sets that allow you to kind of like feed that back into the model so that you have a cycle of improvement happening. And again, this is cheap to do right now. It's applicable across many use cases and many of which we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and just one last thing. So as we move on to this slide, sorry. So as we move on to this, and what Sert was talking about is this, this foundation of specifically what you are looking to do is, it really is only as good as the data. And I mean, the big revolution that effectively kind of unlocked the door to this is, historically, I think people generally understood AI models as almost something that was exclusively just putting out numbers. And the idea that they can start producing conversational, easy to understand, easy to digest. And Sarup, I'll let you disagree with me a little bit if you want, but I feel like it's almost turned the paradigm of AI on its head, where historically the way that effectively everyone was training models is, you felt like you had to reduce everything to a set of numbers, or ideally even a set of like yes or no's. And the idea that the LLMs have been able to figure out how to actually take conversations and find the trends and to be able to be trained off of conversations themselves is really the thing that's unlocked AI and has gotten everybody excited from this. It's this conceptual idea of, I've got a bunch of numbers and then I can produce an additional set of numbers, to this is something that literally everyone, I mean, you can use these LLMs, these large language models that are being trained to teach a 5-year-old. And so this really has unlocked the power of AI across the whole organization, but you still have that same issue of, what is the quality of the conversational data that I'm feeding into the model to then to be able to produce a desired output that's going to be useful across the organization. So, when I'm using my contact center, when I've got my branches, when I'm an executive that's asking an AI model for specific results, you still have that same fundamental problem of, if I'm putting a bunch of bad information in, what exactly am I getting out of it? And that training of the models ends up being really, really key. And when you're using something like ChatGPT or something else, they've spent the actual hardware costs is one thing, but then there's an actual human cost to just go in and say, that's a good answer, that's a bad answer, that's a good answer, that's a bad answer, to try to get out bad data that have been fed into these models is really, really key.
I would say that, just to add to that, look, these models are really good at predicting the next word over and over again. That's all they're doing. It's predicting the next word over and over again. But depending on your use case, context is critical, right? Because the word bank can mean a number of things. It could mean bank by a river or money in the bank, right? So depending on your use case in financial services, you wouldn't want the model to speak like to a bank by a river. You would want to speak about a money in a bank, and providing context and fine tuning the model to understand that it needs to respond in one way versus the other. It's not necessarily the data's bad. It's just that it may be missing context in order to serve the use case that you're focused on, because this technology is like electricity. It's so broadly applicable, and every use case requires different context that's fed into the model or fine-tuned in order to get the outcome that you desire. So it doesn't steer away the member, for example, from a response that would be expected.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and this goes back to this idea. So I heard an interview recently with a couple like of the most forward-thinking people in AI, and the 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 strongest models are going to be the ones that have data that are very highly already attuned to the output. So if I'm just feeding in the full information of the internet, which is what you're going to be getting with like a general chat GPT or DeepSeek or anything else, it's going to have that context of bank, meaning a river bank, and bank where you're banking at. But if you can have very highly specialized, already very clean data specifically about your financial institution that are being fed in, that's going to be really, really key and critical. And that's where our three companies are each having this very highly specialized data set, where if you use those as your data foundation to be fed in with what you're doing with your members, there's going to be a huge amount of value there. So David, if you wanted to speak against that first one specifically about like member sentiment.
Yeah, that's what we do. And member surveys are the key to getting that actionable member information out. The sentiment of the member, as we've all talked about this is key to understanding and making a better member experience. Member sentiment is everything we do in LiveSurvey. So
Yeah, and if you wanted to move on, I think we'll go to the next slide and then we'll come back to it. So
that's where I was getting at it. I didn't know if I should jump ahead. So this is a member sentiment is the super. And we are specific around transactions and events that are specifically happening at the credit union. We can capture how members actually say they feel. With the technology now, with the large language models, their ability to understand and comprehend what members are saying, it's become a complete invaluable tool. Working with the folks at Senso and Datava, it's just such a perfect suite. We can go out, collect this great information, work with Senso to categorize it, and then put it all together and hand it off to Gordon, where he can later use it inside of their data analytics model. It's just a perfect fit of the use of this information.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's one piece of it. And then we've got the next part, which is specifically about, and we can actually, and so David, this is still talking a little bit more about like how we're taking the different member sentiment and then we're pairing it with the data set of, and this is this piece where for everything that you're feeding into it, you also need to be able to measure how good that specific information that you're feeding into it is. And so to have an effectively trained model, so again, for ChatGPT to speak specifically, the way that they got this to work is they took a giant amount of data effectively from the internet, from a variety of sources. Some of those they're being sued for, but they took it in from a giant amount of sources. And then they had to go in and say, this is a good output. This is something that the model actually is specifically doing that ends up working. From that. So there are effectively 4 steps that have to be done. And if you're doing it in a broad-based way, they have to be done manually, where you're effectively starting with pre-training the model. You're then effectively fine-tuning it. You've got reinforced learning, and then you need to effectively like transfer that learning over. But if you have the measured output, so what that means is if I know what my members are specifically doing from what their transactions are, what accounts they're opening, how much of their share of wallet am I specifically capturing, and then I can use that as the outputs that I'm measuring of good values versus bad values against member sentiment. I can now take the power of the LLMs to use this conversational sentiment and measure it against that specific desired output. And so that really ends up being kind of the unlocking and using LLMs in a very unique and powerful way for financial institutions is you have these 3 different data sets. You've got all of the information of what's coming into your contact center. You have all of the information from your member sentiment of what they're specifically telling you about how they feel about the institution. And then you have more information about your members than like Amazon or anyone else has, to quote Ann Legg, about how they're specifically behaving. And that allows you to have that fully trained model in a very, very powerful way that effectively no one else that is effectively leveraging LLMs is able to do currently. And so, Sarup, I'll let you talk a little bit about kind of like the keys from your area of what you've seen as really the criteria for these models.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've been working closely with many credit unions, like hundreds, if not thousands, of credit unions, like staff and executives over the last like 5 years on really kind of conversational AI, and like this is pre and post ChatGPT, and really what I've seen is an evolution of 4 pillars, right? And really kind of as I've said, right, like most of when credit unions start to think about embedding LLMs into their workflows, whether it be staff or customer or member facing conversational AI. The first step is really, okay, let's like ingest our policies, procedures, guides, everything that like our like MSRs on the front line rely on in order to effectively serve members. Let's just input that into a knowledge base and start to enable search, right? And what happens is, initially the MSRs are getting information, and it's really good. Like it's better than actually going into SharePoint and looking through 300-page documents or 50-page documents and having to call back office, which is the current state of most credit unions prior to adopting like a search capability on the front line, like I described, right? But what happens over time is that, once organizations use this on an ongoing basis, they realize that the very nature of their policies, procedures, guides, there's gaps, there's conflicts. Version controlling hasn't been handled in the past really well. There's missing information because who has time to update documents, right? And what happens when search occurs is that over time, questions cannot be answered, or there's hallucinations, right? So that magical ability at the beginning all of a sudden turns into, well, we have a problem because there's a lot of misleading information being sent to our MSRs or our members, right? So a lot of the realization comes to, what do we do about that? So really these 4 pillars is something that we specialize in at Senso, which is, one, you got to have a set of evaluation criteria to understand whether your models and the models that are being fine-tuned in your organization are effectively performing better, and you need to measure how that's getting better over time, right? So I call these evals, right? It's a standard term that most of these AI labs are using today. So having a standard set of evals and metrics to evaluate the effectiveness of the model is critical as a foundation. Then you want to ensure that, like, every time a question is asked by an MSR, for example, that you have a tight feedback loop to understand, what wasn't able to be answered effectively, what was a conflict, what was a gap, so that back office teams and content owners in the back office actually understand what updates to make, right? So that's the second pillar. The third pillar is self-improvement. How do you leverage data in your organization to auto-generate content so you can automatically fill those gaps? Whether it be actual knowledge put back into your knowledge base or your intranet, or model data that's used to fine-tune those models. That's typically like, the feedback loop that Gordon was talking about. Did this particular outcome have an effect on, reducing wait time or improving member sentiment, right? So really self-improvement is the knowledge and the gaps that I'm filling actually effective in producing outcomes that, we as, the credit union care about, whether it be MSC or the back office knowledge management, training and development. And then the last pillar is you want to be able to kind of like explain the model and the model output and understand how it determined the response, right? And I would say that like this was probably a lot more difficult up until, I would say, October of last year, when reasoning models started to become really capable. So OpenAI launched the first reasoning model, O1. Many of you may have used it. And over the last, like I would say, 4 months, the thinking of these models has become a lot more transparent. So you can really understand how these models are making decisions. And DeepSeek is the example of this. DeepSeek is I'm sure many of you have heard about this, but DeepSeek reveals the thinking patterns of these models. So explainability and transparency and evaluating where these models are thinking the right or the wrong way has all of a sudden opened up a whole world of possibilities of this self-improvement cycle. So these are the 4 pillars that require a lot of technical expertise that are really required as a baseline to improve your knowledge that are going to result in more effective outcomes. So in terms of model reliability, it isn't only based on your knowledge base and your ability to improve it internally. These models are improving at a rapid rate. So this slide shows the evolution of GPT-2 in 2019 to GPT-3 to GPT-4 in 2023, which is really an inflection point. I would say GPT-4 was that inflection point where these models really started to kind of show human level reasoning capabilities and human level abilities, right? And then O1, as I mentioned, was the precipice of these models actually showing thinking patterns, which were more transparent, which ultimately allow you to really understand kind of like where these models are reasoning correctly or not correctly, right? Based on the data set. And the ability to take data like the feedback loop and the output of that and human feedback to really refine these models has exponentially improved in the last few months in particular. And we're going to see this improvement continue at an exponential rate all the way to human level abilities and beyond. So I would expect in the next year or two, we expect this ARC AGI evaluation metric is essentially a measure of how effective a model is at achieving human level reasoning capabilities, which we're on the cusp of today. So as these models get better, the outcomes are going to get better effectively as well.
Yeah, and so as you think about the different discipline and how effective the models are themselves, there's also the question of how do financial institutions go through this full process? And so at the first level, you're going to start collecting data across all of these different data sources. And so when you're talking about collecting, you've got your core, you've got your LOS, you've got contact center data with all of the transcripts, you have your survey data, you have online banking data. And this goes back to this idea that financial institutions have more access to more information about their members than any other area really in the economy. I mean, Google, think about what they have. A lot of it's anonymized. It's not really fully clear. Financial institutions are very uniquely positioned. But having that data, you then have to go through this process where you're going to go and map, curate, normalize that information. Then once you have that, that's when you can actually start really turning on AI. Towards that underlying data set and allow it to go through this process that Sarup was specifically talking about, where it will do chain of reasoning. It will give a result and then ask itself, was that actually a good result? And in my experience, and I think Sarup's as well, the best models are the ones that are explaining to you that chain of reasoning as they're going through it. And it allows some sort of intermediary to be able to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on how successful that is. All of that gets you really valuable, useful information. But once you've got that, now you need a delivery mechanism to be able to deliver it throughout the organization, because you have these really valuable insights that can be delivered in a conversational, very digestible and understandable way to your contact center, to your frontline staff, to the management team, to marketing. I mean, they're all thirsty for this, and they're going to be requiring something a little bit different for them to be able to use it. And then as that gets delivered to these different areas, you're then going to want to specifically be able to say, how is this actually resulting in changes of our overall value of the credit union? So is this improving member experience? Is this reducing fees? Is this reducing call time? So you don't want to just deploy something like this without having some very clear definitions of success to understand what the real value is. and automating those processes. And so as you come up with your AI strategy of what you're looking to do, you want to have a definition of that summit of, as you're going through this process, as you're bringing on different vendors, as you're going through all of these difficult disciplines, you don't just want to say, I need AI. It's, I need AI to do these very specific things. And as you're doing that, you want to measure your specific activities and your energy and your spend against these outputs that you're specifically measuring. Sarup or David, any additional comments on any of that?
No, I think you got it.
So let's talk about mitigating of the AI risks. So you're doing all of this. You've got this definition of success. You know what you're trying to achieve. What are the big dangers, right? Like, what's that cliff's edge that you're going to fall down? What's the, you know, the version, not to stretch the metaphor too thin, but, you know, like, what's the frostbite that you can possibly get, right? Like, what's the trench you can fall down? And we've got effectively kind of like 5 main categories that are specifically here. One is what does that actual human and AI collaboration specifically look like? So I think one of the best examples that I know is like chatbots, right? So everybody's like, well, I'm just going to turn on an AI chatbot and it's just going to be able to handle all of the communication with my members moving forward. The few use cases of that have not turned out very well. You really need to have a good interaction between humans and this. And this is where, you know, I think Sarup and the Senso team have done a good job of calling it like a co-pilot, because I think that's really kind of like the best example is you're still, at least where the models are right now, is they have not been able to fully replace any kind of like human or anything else that you specifically got there. What you want to do is just enable your humans to be that much more effective. And so you're going to want that collaboration between them. The next one is, you know, the bias audits and explainability. So, you know, one of the really important things that we have within Datava is anything that an AI produces within our system, it actually shows you the underlying logic that it used to get to that. And so especially within our system, it's doing a lot of like query building. It actually shows you the underlying query set so that you have that explainability of specifically what's going on. Sarup, anything in those first 2 points before I continue on that you wanted to hit on?
With regards to human AI collaboration, like a lot of the time you'll hear the term human in the loop, like, right? So it's like augmenting their abilities. Like, so in the front office, like, you know, a search while you're talking to a member would be an augmentation. We're starting to see more sophisticated capabilities that go beyond augmentation. Like voice AI agents and workflow agents are becoming really sophisticated at completely being autonomous in terms of interacting with members or with staff. So there are use cases that really complex use cases that require human AI collaboration. But a lot of the workload can be taken off by like autonomous agents, which are starting to emerge in many workflows, including interacting autonomously with members that go beyond just the IVR. Very flexible, scoped agents that behave like humans. Like they're very lifelike. In terms of bias, audits, and explainability, just to kind of touch on that, you know, like any human, you hire a new MSR, you need to train them to be effective at resolving dispute transactions or, you know, loan applications or whatever the use case is. These models also need to be trained, right? And so the training of a model is different than the training of a human, but ultimately at the end of the day, the capabilities of these models now being called agents are essentially comparable to human-like capabilities. So that ongoing evaluation and feedback loop that I talked about before is going to be something that requires a human in the loop, likely in the back office, to evaluate, you know, what's going right and what's going wrong.
Right. Yeah. So then when we talk about member-centric AI deployment, this is where, again, if you're directly delivering the AI to members, you have to be very careful that you're doing that effectively and correctly with 100% training. So some contact centers have done through a giant amount of training to effectively get to that 100% where they know that it is going to be correctly done. The last two, I would say, are the biggest two, especially for financial institutions, is you need to be very careful with your cybersecurity measures. And then there is also a regulatory landscape on both of those. So like we're specifically located in Colorado. At least as of today, Colorado has on the books that effectively very, very restrictive legislation around AI models that if they stay in place as they are right now, we will have to turn it off for all of our Colorado clients. Like we literally can't run it at all for any of our Colorado clients. So the regulatory landscape is very much a moving target right now, especially for financial institutions, because there can be inherent bias from the underlying training set. So if you're using this for like loan qualification or loan pre-qualification or other things like that, you need to be very careful and thoughtful with how you're specifically utilizing that.
I think also like think about the use cases that you want to get started with, right? So is it staff facing or member facing at first? So staff facing is a lot less risk in terms of like, ironing out the kinks and getting it to a level of response quality that's high. But one other thing to watch out from a cybersecurity standpoint when rolling out to members is phishing attacks in LLMs are a real thing. They're rare today, but they're only going to increase in sophistication over time. And so there are solutions out there that mitigate against that, that are the last line of defense before data hits the model to avoid any sort of phishing attacks that tap into kind of real data that are used as an output to the model. Because a lot of these models do tap into core. For example, if you need to, perform a transaction or unlock an account, a lot of these agents are tapping into core data. And then, on the regulatory side, I've talked to the NCUA about this, and, Rodney Hood was on my last call. He's got a lot of influence there too, about a framework that needs to be put in place on like, standard evals on, the readiness of a particular model for a particular use case, right? And evaluations do not exist in the credit union space. They exist here in Silicon Valley. And that's a foundation for how these models are tested and rolled out. But evals do not exist in the credit union space. And one of the things I've been, really talking to the NCUA about is implementing a set of evaluations that determine how ready a model is for, especially a member-facing use case. So expect all of that to come in the months and years to come.
Yeah, but I mean, we don't know what it's going to look like, right? and I think Rodney's been great. Rodney's not with the NCUA anymore, but he has a lot of insight to specifically what's happening there. And the NCUA, at least from my experience, and I think similar with you, Sarup, they seem to be a very receptive and forward-thinking organization as long as they understand that this is being deployed to serve members and not to be predatory. And again, I think that this is a very unique position that if credit unions are very thoughtful with how they deploy this, the NCUA, I think, is going to be much more favorable to allowing them to do it. So it's one of those things where the NCUA, I believe, at least currently, seems to be permissive as long as no one exercises the tragedy of the commons and does something very predatory. And then they're going to probably have to come in and be much firmer with the regulations on that side of things. So, when we are talking about this, these are the risks. We've talked about the process. These are these like desired business cases that exist. Fraud detection is one of these really interesting areas where it's a giant problem with financial institutions. And we're in a very, very good position to be able to leverage all of the different data that we have to be much more proactive with flagging certain kinds of behavior as riskier, and then being able to be much more proactive with reaching out to the members to confirm this actually was you, rather than being on the back end and having the exposure and after the fact having to clean up the mess of fraud. Loan approval, I think, is the one that there's a giant amount of action already in, where there are a lot of companies out there that are using it for loan approval. And so people have seen that. Let's talk a little bit more on kind of the next three with member personalization. So, member personalization, that's what makes credit unions different, right? Is the idea that you have members and not customers, and that you as a financial institution really should be able to leverage the huge amount of data. So there's this term of, information asymmetry, where, if you go into a used car dealer, they know more about that used car historically than the seller knows more about that car than the buyer. But with data and being able to leverage things like Carfax and being able to do research and being able to look at other things around, history of specific cars, you try to fix that information asymmetry. But with financial institutions, you're in a unique position because you actually get to know more about that member than they know themselves because of the data that you have and being able to leverage that against the LLM. So you can be able to create a very highly personalized marketing strategy, a very highly personalized member interaction, because you know more about that member than they really understand about themselves, because you don't get to just compare that member's behavior against themselves. You get to train them into similar members with similar attributes across all of that. So there are so many unique opportunities that you're going to be able to have within that. People really understand, I think, and have seen a little bit of the value of chatbots and what they're doing with virtual assistants, where it can be much more conversational, and the value of what's been done historically with chatbots, being able to leverage the LLMs ends up being a lot more successful. The final piece, and Sarup, I'll let you talk about this because I think you've got some good and interesting use cases with reduced call time and improved member experience. And then David, I'll let you chime in as well on this.
Great. Yep. I'm really going to be focusing on the three on the right, and just to extend off what Gordon said, the dream is right now, like up until I would say very recently, the strategy for credit union targeting to members has been batch and blast. It's sending the same message to every single member, right? And obviously that's just not how the world works, right? We're finally at a stage where you can get down to a level of personalization to the individual member. And it all comes down to, actually storing memory about every member interaction. So you understand that the next interaction you have with them, they felt bad on the last call and they called because they called about a dispute transaction. And the call before that, they had a really positive experience with a loan. And the call before that was their onboarding call when they enrolled. And that was a really great experience, right? And so the next best action can actually be down to the individual level. And you could automate that and personalize it with systems that, store that memory. That's what Senso does. We analyze call data. We tap into a knowledge set and improve that knowledge set to provide Datava with the ability to actually target that individual member with a very personalized email, very personalized communication with content that, allows them to self-serve and prevents them from having to call in the future, potentially. And if they do call in the future, we now have the ability to deploy lifelike voice agents to interact with those customers that surpass, human capabilities. And that allows reallocation of staff to more complex use cases. Your MSR's time is extremely valuable, and you want to reallocate them to more complex tasks and take the tier one sort of like calls, really to automation. So all of this is possible right now. All of this is actually very possible in a short period of time, where any credit union can get to base state right now to optimal efficiency very, very quickly. And I'm saying in weeks. We see this like across every credit union that we work with. And I know Gordon's seeing a lot of success here too. So I'd be excited if I was an executive at a credit union because of what's possible today. Obviously in a safe way to avoid, some of the risks that we talked about on the previous slide.
Yeah, awesome. David, anything that you wanted to add on this?
All I would add is we are able to collect sentiment directly from the member. And when we understand how members feel about particular transactions, and now with the use of AI to be able to curate that information into really usable, actionable data in a real-time format is incredibly valuable, what you can now leverage with this information. Members are telling you how they feel. If you could just better understand how to use that information to help improve their experience. That's the key to what we are doing, where I see this as incredibly valuable stuff that we're doing here.
Yeah, so I'm just going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into Datava, and then we'll talk a little bit more specifically around what LiveSurvey is doing and Senso is doing in to serve credit unions and how we're effectively leveraging the AI. So first, just at a high level, what we're specifically doing at Datava is we call ourselves that full data activation platform. So that journey from data collection all the way to providing that end desired result, that's what we're doing. We've never lost a client since we started doing it. That beginning of that journey with all of the different collection of that data, we are really at the top tier with being able to pull in all of that disparate data and being able to collect it. And then on the other side is we have some of the strongest end user adoption numbers, where everybody's really able to then end up being able to leverage that data. And as an organization, we really focus on kind of the 4 key reasons why financial institutions make decisions. Is we want you to be able to grow your revenue. We also want you to be able to make your employees that much more efficient and effective with what they're doing. We also want to really improve your member experience. And then the last thing is we want to de-risk your organization. So every project for every one of our clients, we really focus on these like desired measured outputs of specifically what we're doing. David, I'll let you talk a little bit about LiveSurvey.
So the core of what LiveSurvey does is transaction-based member experience surveys. Every transaction that a member comes in and performs at a branch is surveyed within minutes of that branch transaction taking place. As a result, you can imagine the insights that we are collecting continuously. We break all of that data out by individual employees at the credit union, by individual branches. So for our clients, we're trying to paint a picture of any hotspots, any areas of issues that are popping up, trying to give them as much feedback, data-driven feedback that they can to effectively use. However, you can click the next slide. Sorry about that. And anyways, but what efficiencies that we've had is when you start collecting and this data, the problem that we ran into very quickly was comment curation. Members are giving you great input from their comments. I always talk to our clients about is the comments are really a gold mine of information that members are giving back to you. And a lot of times, maybe it's not even something you're specifically surveying about. But until working with Gordon and Sarup, it has been a very tedious process, time-consuming, error-prone, and inefficient. However, when you can overlay this, if you can export, and one of the things that we are doing, the next slide, is we are able now to export this common language over to folks at Senso, who can now take that, ingest those comments, and put them back into results that we can see. We can see how our promoters are behaving over time. We can see how our detractors are behaving over time. We can see particular branches or employees and how they're behaving over time. This is really just blowing up my world a lot on what we can do with this information. Then, not only from our perspective, then if you hand the data off to Datava or the folks in that business to overlay that with the core data that they're sitting on, it becomes incredibly valuable, an incredible valuable tool to help improve member experience.
Yeah, it's just a funny side story, David. I don't know if you knew this, but when I first started in this world, one of the very first projects I was doing is we were taking all of the comment section, and these were from like 3-figure billion-dollar banks. And I was paying teams of people to go read every single comment and then to categorize them. Yep. And I oversaw a project to just look for specific terms, right? Like I really liked or I hated. And then we said, well, if someone starts a sentence with that, it's likely not going to be a good thing. And so we were able to automate a certain amount of categorization. That's the most simplistic form of what we're doing. We're now at the deepest end of the pool. And to reference all the way back to what Sarup was showing is the superpower of what these LLMs are able to do, of deep level reasoning, of being able to leverage that underlying data set. So Senso really turns this comment section from simplistic, like this is a promoter, this is a detractor. They told us a 9, they told us a 4. We don't necessarily, that's not as valuable as their reason for a 9 or their reason for a 4. And all of this really valuable information where they're directly telling us what they care about, that's really able to be unlocked and then to correlate it against member behavior. So, Saru?
Yeah, fantastic. Do I have time to show some fancy stuff?
Yeah, please.
Awesome. I'll just share my screen. Great. Can everyone see this? Great.
Yeah.
So I'll start off by sharing, like, ingesting raw audio data and tagging calls with just like to analyze sentiment is essentially the basic of what David was talking about. We do that with survey data, we do that with calls, etc. But really where the new capability comes in is generating new content and exploring all of the reasons and the behavior and enabling anyone to do that, not just data scientists. So I'm going to show you some cool stuff. I want to show you what's possible. So here's calls over the last 30 days. And they're categorized. So we auto categorize calls. Again, all we need is the audio data, like tens of thousands of calls per credit union. We do this at Maps as well. And you can drill into each category. Let's say online banking. The CSAT for online banking is 88% in the last 30 days. The resolution is 78%. And you could drill down into this and see subcategories. And I have set prompts here, but you could do really cool stuff. Again, anybody in the organization can do this in the back office. You do not need to be a data scientist. So I guess what stands out to me is, okay, mobile banking support. Okay, 83%, 91, but why are there so many calls, right? So I could simply ask a question. Oops. My bad. You can simply ask a question and we'll give it a few minutes to run. So let's let this run in the background. It takes about 30 seconds. And what it's doing is it's processing the information. It's looking at those segments of call transcripts to come up with a report on the behavior, the reasons why members called in about mobile banking app support. The cool thing is you can do anything with call transcript data. You can generate emails, you can generate guides, you can generate policies, you can generate procedures. You can ask very specific questions on why the resolution rates were so low and uncover insights. So this would be, top reasons why people called in for this particular issue. So the point is you can actually get context now of very granular segments of calls, right? And sky's the limit. You can generate content, fill holes in your knowledge base. You can generate training guides, and you could do whatever you want, and you don't have to be a data scientist to do it. You just need a search field. And we're seeing all sorts of reports being generated by all sorts of back office and front office teams to gather context of what's actually happening on the front line with members. So that's one example of what I'll show you. The other example of what I'll show you is here's a chat interface. I mean, this is pretty standard, right? I'll just show you like a chat interface. This is the knowledge base is filled with all contents, basically from a credit union's website, right? So just reset this actually. So all of this content is from a credit union's website, and you can search this content, and it's pretty easy. So this is becoming actually table stakes at all credit unions. The ability to search when you're an MSR on the front line to get quick information on like how to enroll, how to resolve a dispute transaction and everything. What we do is we bring this to the next level, and we produce a gap report, and we produce what's called a quality score. And this quality score is how many questions were actually answered effectively, and per department and per topic. So this is for account management and opening accounts. You could see all of the gaps of content that wasn't able to fulfill a response on the front line. And you're able to assign that to content owners and fill those gaps in particular documents, full content management. And as your response quality gets better, your hallucinations reduce. The ability to answer member questions more effectively increases, and the ability to actually improve sentiment, reduce wait time, and improve resolution effectively becomes, like the highest qualities possible, i.e. reliability. So any credit union can get this gap report from us. All we need is your website. And if you'd like one, I'm happy to produce one for you. Just reach out to me and I'll produce a free gap report for you so you can access this and see an assessment on your website.
Yeah, and I mean, to cycle back to what we were talking about earlier, Sarup just went very quickly how Senso does all 4 steps of the training process of an AI model, right? So he talks about how he's taking your underlying data set, he's training off of it, he's delivering it, he's allowing people to give feedback of how successful it is, and then he has the system itself reporting back on the specific gaps, where if you fill that additional data set, you're going to reduce the amount of hallucination and you're going to improve the overall model. So Senso is providing a huge amount of value. So, I mean, David, within LiveSurvey, he's got this giant value of what they're able to do on their side of bringing in an extremely valuable data source. The documents that you already have, that's another very valuable data source that's in a conversational way that you used not to be able to leverage. And so bringing those two in and then having that be directly correlated against what's specifically going on within the credit union ends up being really key. So with that in mind, we've got just 10 minutes left. So James, I'm going to turn it over to you quickly to be able to do a little bit of a demo so that you can also see a little bit of the interplay of what we're doing with the survey that's coming in with live data and what we do here at Datava on our side as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Gordon. So yeah, just to get right into it, since we have a short amount of time here, at a high level, our platform as a data warehouse is pulling in data from the core, the LOS, and any of the other providers like LiveSurvey. We use an ELT model, so extract, load, then transform, which gives 3 main benefits. First, you don't have to send data in a specific format, saves time and speeds up ROI. Second, every transformation is recorded in the system, so you have full visibility into the metrics that we're calculating, where the data comes from, where it flows, how it's changed. And then third, we have raw data like this survey data here that's completely available for analysis, so nothing gets lost in translation. And what that enables us to do is have a member dashboard somewhat like this, where we can see all of that warehouse data incorporated to provide a single source of truth for the frontline staff. Those staff are served the most recent survey score here in the member dashboard alongside other key metrics, giving them insight into the member's mood and towards the organization. And then as a manager, or if I have permission, I can click through to a more detailed report here showing me that full survey history, as well as full text comments for trend analysis at the member level. Additionally, you can start getting into more advanced analytics here, like this table report. This is just breaking down average survey score by branch and then by FICO tier here. This is a really useful tool for power users, and it functions similarly to a pivot table in Excel, but we can get even more user-friendly by applying a data-informed large language model. So for example, here in my Member 360, I've got an AI assistant where I can sort of ask different questions. Here you can see it's giving me sort of a summary about the member. I could ask it, what is the status of her loan app? And it'll give me a really simple plain text answer to my question here. And then I can go ahead and dig a little further if I want, like when was it last updated? And the model is going to feed back those high quality answers. Additionally, at the table level, you can leverage that conversational AI integration to help non-analysts quickly aggregate data and self-serve specific insights. So for example, I could ask it which members with over 10,000 on deposit have a survey score below 5. And like David mentioned before, and like Sarup has also mentioned, an important part of working with these conversational models is the explainability and transparency. So we record and can display this exact SQL query that the model came up with to answer your question, in addition to just simply filtering down my member list here. So I have those members and I can do outreach, whatever I need to do there. And then finally, our predictive analytics models are using that high quality information in your data warehouse to identify those personalized opportunities for things like next best product. So you can offer them products that they're actually interested in and that'll be useful for their particular financial situation. And then again, using member sentiment as sort of one of those most critical metrics for understanding that member relationship, we can push this likelihood to attrite number here to their dashboard as well, so we can understand, again, whether those members are maybe disengaging, and we can notify the right people so they can intervene before that relationship erodes any further. And then
Awesome.
Finally, go ahead, Gordon.
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah, just finally here, those predictive models can also be leveraged for a more proactive outreach. So for example, finding lists of members for marketing campaigns, I can export these lists directly to my marketing automation tool, run that campaign, and then measure how successful each campaign was by monitoring the core and the LOS. And then, of course, measuring how successful we were. So which suggestions were actually made and opened, and then also continuing to refine that model based on what we're seeing actually happening based on those predictions. So Gordon, I'll
Awesome.
kick it back to you and Michelle.
Great. Thanks a lot, James. Yeah. So, at a high level, everyone knows that they need AI. It's really revolutionary. I mean, I don't think it's an under exaggeration to say that this is going to be as a dramatic shift in what we are doing as a society as the previous industrial revolutions. It's going to just unlock everything. And the people that are going to win are really going to be on the forefront of it. And credit unions, I want to be at the forefront of how this is being deployed to people as a financial institution, because credit unions really should be able to do it in a way that's focused on improving the member experience rather than just extracting value and profit from the member. And so, to be able to do that, again, credit unions are uniquely positioned to be able to leverage the feedback from the members to be able to improve how fast you're giving them the best possible service in the best possible way. And utilizing the strategy that we've talked about is going to be really key to that. Any final statements from Sarup or David before we kind of hand it over to a little bit of a Q&A?
Just one thing, having worked in the credit union space for many, many years, I think the greatest strength is collaboration and the cooperative nature. You guys really are not shy to ask your peers about how they're leveraging this technology, even sharing insights with each other on what's working and what's not. And that has exponential benefits to it. And I would say that is more important now than ever before, because I'm here seeing things change so fast at an exponential rate that we're going to need exponential collaboration in order to win as an industry. And so I would double down on that. If you're an organization, I know, be cautiously optimistic in terms of approach, mitigate the risks, yes, but there is risk in inaction. And I will say, being on the ground floor in Silicon Valley, expect there to be disruption moving forward and try to mitigate that as quickly as possible. Do more with what you have is the credit union mandate. And I would say that, again, cautious optimism in terms of approach, but do not be late to the game because there is disruption coming. And I would really be prepared.
Yeah. Disruption is just like the flip of the coin of opportunity. Right.
Correct.
You want to be the one utilizing the opportunity, not being disrupted. Sorry, David, did you have something?
No, I completely agree. Completely agree.
Yeah. Awesome. Great. Yeah. So with that, just wanted to open it up to a little bit of a Q&A. So we don't need to look at the slide of us, so you can actually just talk. Yeah. Were there any questions that anybody had? I don't know if there was any curation of questions that were coming in specifically that Michelle or anybody else on the team specifically saw.
Yeah, so one's come in. Mary will get you Sarup's email address and he can send you that gap report. So that came in from Mary Stolzenberg. And yeah, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to drop them in our Q&A here. And if you were a credit union executive partner, check your email. You should have gotten the lunch gift card. I know there's been a couple questions of that coming through the chat.
Yeah. Great. Well, I know we're pretty much out of time anyway, so hopefully this has been helpful. We've got our contact information available. So anybody that wants to reach out directly, you can obviously also respond to the invite of this, or you can get our contact info directly from here. So you can feel free to reach out to any one of us via our website or our email address with any follow-up questions or anything else. we're all very passionate and I think very well experienced in the credit union movement and what they're doing. And, you know, again, we just really believe in the need to be buying in to AI, because if you're not doing it, someone else is. And to be very, very clear, the other people that are doing this, I mean, Sarup, you get kind of a frontline seat being in the Valley. Outside of credit unions, I don't think people are asking the same questions of how you can leverage this to really be able to improve the experience of people that are being served. It's a very, very much money-driven thing. And so to be able to leverage that data, to be able to have that balance of, you know, not paying attention to money, but at the same time being able to improve members' lives is something that credit unions are uniquely positioned to do, but you're going to have to leverage the best of tech to be able to do it. So thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. And I'm grateful that you spent the last hour with us. Hopefully it was helpful to everyone. Sarup and David, I'll let you say your goodbyes and thanks as well.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you having me, and good luck.
Yeah, and I would just say the same thing. It's this is an exciting time. It's really exciting to see this evolve in a very short period of time. What we are able to do now with member sentiment, it is fantastic to really be able to take this, turn it around, and deploy it very rapidly at a credit union. So exciting times.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, everyone.